Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and hi. Welcome back to another episode of Addiction Got a Minute. I'm your host, Howie Marlin, with my co-host, Patti Pike. Hello, Patricia.
Hi, Howie. How are you today?
Well, so far, so good. Freezing my butt here in New England, though. Woke up to 24 degrees.
Wow, cold there.
Yeah. Well, it is.
It's very nice here in San Francisco.
We
have so much smoke. We got a lot of smoke going on here, Howie.
Oh, I know. And it being November 15th, 2018, we are very aware of the catastrophic fires that you guys are having there in the north and the south of California. And we're here with our guest, Kathlene Parker from down in L.A. Patti, why don't you introduce our guest?
Sure. Anyway, it's my pleasure to have Kathlene Parker come on to our podcast this morning. I met Kathlene, I think it was back in June last year in Burbank, California. She attended one of my intervention trainings, and via Joe Hunter, it's a good friend of mine that owns Cycle of Change up in Palmdale, California. Anyway, Kathlene attended my 3-day training, and I got to know her a little bit, and I was really inspired by what she's doing in all over the United States, but mainly right now she's in Los Angeles. So I would like to introduce Kathlene Parker.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be asked by you to come on and share a little bit. Yes, I did attend your amazing intervention training along with Mark Rose, who also covered the case management training as well. And it was very beneficial. So thank you for that again.
You're welcome, Kathlene.
Patty, how many people?
So glad that you could come.
How many people were at that training?
There was 16. There was actually 16 folks that attended that training.
And where was it held?
Burbank, California. It was actually held at a outpatient program called Multi-Concept Outpatient Program in Burbank.
Wow. I look forward to us talking more about that probably offline after that.
Sure.
Well, Kathlene, tell me about your program. When woke up one day deciding I'm going to start this shindig and off you went?
Well, I'd like to say it all happened like that, but the truth is, I started sober companioning about 5 years ago now. And through that experience, I did wake up about a year ago.
Well, hold on. Before you go there, why don't you tell me what is sober companioning? Because we have an interesting audience. You should know we have people who are really in the know, and we have people who don't know. So lay it on us.
Yes, absolutely. So sober companioning is somebody who goes with somebody out of treatment, or they could even still be in treatment, or going to, their sober living, or just going and starting up a new place of living, going back home, and they have somebody live with them either 24 hours a day, and they help them guide. They're pretty much guided by these sober companions, and they're there for, any sort of support that they might need. For an example, I lived with a woman for about 5 months in Brooklyn, New York, and we would go run errands together. I introduced her to AA meetings. We went grocery shopping. I fixed a little bit of food here and there. She's 60 years old. She's still one of my favorite people. I love her so much, and I still check in with her. It's her birthday today too, actually, so that's funny. And for an example, we went to Manhattan to run some errands, and she had just gotten out of 5 months of treatment here in Los Angeles, and she had a panic attack, and I was there to help her through that and just let her know, breathe, look at that sign over there. What do you see? And talked her down and she said to me, like, if I wasn't there, she would have probably picked up that day, you know, and that's like, that was right after treatment. And she was in treatment, like I said, for a good 5 to 6 months.
That's
So,
really interesting, and maybe we'll get back around to it in a little bit. But the idea of somebody to be engaged with someone 24/7 basically is going to make sure that they're at every corner of that person's existence, which
absolutely.
I'm going to tell you that there are scant few options to basically guarantee that somebody's going to follow doctor's recommendations, a protocol back to sanity, and doing that kind of work clearly would be beneficial. And obviously it did for this woman, so good for you. Good for that. So there you were, sober companioning, and then all of a sudden one day
I just, realized that I needed to go do some work on myself. So I did. I took myself to do, because, in this field, I have to make sure that I take care of myself. And part of that is doing my personal work on my own recovery journey. I'm in recovery now 7 years, and I was in Nashville at the time, thank you, and I took myself to Onsite. I heard about it from a blogger I follow, and I just decided to go there for a 7-day, their Living Center 1, and that's where I actually met Joe Hunter from Cycles of Change, as Patti brought up earlier, Joe Hunter. And anyways, I did some inner work on myself, and then I realized through doing on-site work, which is really a deep trauma based kind of work, and then working with a woman named Christine Oweno, that through really just unlocking so many deep truths about who I am, my purpose, why I'm here, I came to a realization that I wanted to take this work in recovery, working with others as a sober companion, but give more support to the whole deal. So for an example, I worked for a lot of agencies who just sent me out as a sober companion without anybody really overseeing the situation. So it would just be me and the companion, and there'd be no one else to really bounce anything off of. Or I would be the one who was holding all these goals, or, trying to help the person show up. And I would most of the time become the bad guy. So I realized it wasn't working. There was something that wasn't working. I felt like I was enabling the whole situation. I wanted to make it better. So I thought of, making that third person to hold the structure of accountability. And a lot of people know case managers or case management. And I like to call them mentors, because I like to bring it onto another level of human, talking to human, inspiring, engaging, encouraging somebody, and then holding the structure of accountability.
Okay.
And then the sober companion would pretty much, like we do, go with the client, which I call humans, or people who are new in recovery, through life, and just show up with them and just really have the case manager hold more of the schedule conversations, opening, transparent conversations of honesty, finding what makes this person tick. What do they like when they wake up in the morning? Like, what do they want to do in life?
Okay.
So anyways, it's more of a inspirational take on the whole sober companion service that really has somebody overseeing each case and talking to them each week, holding goals, holding conversations, and just really checking in. Also with the sober companion, because the sober companion sometimes they go out there on their own and they're all by themselves for a long time. And, I want to make sure that someone's looking after me too. So it's important.
Yeah. I think that I was just jotting down some of the things that you were saying, Kathleen, and I think it's great that, you realize, being, in this field and taking care of yourself and the importance of really trying to make sure that you have that self-care and having that accountability, as a professional moving into this field, because it is a very complex field as far as dealing with the types of individuals that we deal with as professionals. Especially if you've got someone that has a complex trauma or a complex mental health issue, and that you too it sounds like to me that you're also looking to someone where you can have that accountability, that you can kind of bounce things off, where you're not sort of, trying to figure out things on your own. And I think that that's a really inspiring way, to sort of take care of yourself, but also to be, to have that supervision as you kind of move forward in your career, to, where you can be the best professional that you can be for that client, to really stay client-centered. So I really appreciate that about you, and I definitely am inspired by that.
Well, clearly, Kathleen, there's Patti sees something in you which brought you to us. So I have to say that it's these kind of experiences. This is inspirational. We just met. I don't know you, but knowing what you're doing, the whole thing is bringing the kind of work that you do to another level. The thing that stuck with me is supervision. Being out there on your own, even those of us who have been doing things for a long time, you tend to, we are human. We're going to go to the lowest hanging fruit. We're going to do the things that are easiest. We're going to stay away from conflict, and we're going to try to, sometimes you just want to get home early from work, and it doesn't serve the client or the patient or the human the way that they deserve. It's not that you're doing anything you're not breaking HIPAA, you're not doing anything immoral, unethical, or anything like that. It's just you're giving less than you can. And you find you can give more and actually do it easier when you have supervision, because you have another person's thoughts and experiences, wisdom. And with that, they can guide you to make a decision, whereas in the past it had been conflict, you may have not been comfortable or confident about it. But here you have somebody who is chiming in, and there you get to enact that portion of your helping the person, and you do it comfortably. So emotional, you don't pay that price. And at the end of the day, you're not wiped out because you've got that team, you've got that other person.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that I always kind of, and I've talked about this on the show before, when I originally started to work in the intervention field, originally I had a mentor, I had a supervisor, if you will, for 2 years. And at that time, I had 17 years of working in every aspect possible, inpatient, outpatient, community-based, working as a educator with doctors. But I came into this field not really understanding, I understood the intervention process, but I really needed to have that support when I was out there, in the middle of Alberta, Canada, or in the middle of, Pittsburgh, and all of a sudden I'm left with this family and I'm left with this client, and I was overwhelmed by the amount of people that I was dealing with. So having that supervision, having that mentor for a couple of years really helped me to form my own sort of intervention business. And it also protected me in a way that I could actually take care of myself and keep myself first and foremost. So I really appreciate that about you, Kathleen.
Yeah, thank you so much. You did bring up family, too, the families that are also surrounded in all these situations of, when I go with somebody home, it could be, like I said, like the woman who I was with, she's a mother, and her family was there, and sometimes people would come to me, and ask me questions. And sometimes it could be overwhelming when really the person that I need to be focused on is the person who is new in recovery. And sometimes parents too can be on top of the companion, and that could be difficult.
Well, That's actually a really good subject. Let's pick that up after the break, folks. We're just going to step away from our mics for just a minute. So quiet on the set, and we'll be back in just a minute. The views and opinions expressed on this show are of the hosts, the guests, and callers. They do not necessarily reflect the views of Addiction Got a Minute or the organizations associated with them. Okay, we are back, and thank you all very much for that. And we're joined today with my co-host, Patricia Pike, Patti Pike, interventionist of the stars out there in. She's a dual citizen of the United States and the United States of cannabis, and so it's really up there in the great state of Canada.
Cannabis.
The great state of cannabis, which we're all getting very used to somewhat. I don't know if I'm used to it or not, but that's a subject for a long discussion. And our guest today is Kathlene Parker. That's right, Kathlene Parker?
Yes, hello.
And your company's name is again?
Voyage and Serenity.
Voyage and Serenity. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. Before the break, we were talking about the importance of family with our work. And there's actually a great deal of focus on dynamics, the integral role that family plays. And there are many definitions of addiction, but we know that one of the definitions, the opposite of addiction, is the lack of connection. So when people reconnect, they tend to put together the missing components, which force them to look outward and seek things to otherwise quell the pain and of the disconnection. Tell me about some of your experiences working with families, Kathlene.
Yeah, I tend to want to please everybody. So when I am with the person new in recovery and they're coming out of treatment back home, and the mom and dad and sister and everybody's there, and they're looking to me, and they're asking questions, and they're also sometimes determining what the rules are without asking for professional advice or suggestions. So that can lead us down a really tricky road. And I have had some really terrible experiences, unfortunately, in that role of just being the only one out there and not having that case management or supervisor to really,
That I want to hear a little bit without breaking any confidentiality.
Yes,
give me an example of something which fell apart on you. Not to point out something you did wrong, because we all do make mistakes, but how we learn from it is the purpose for the question. And you can tell me, no, I'd rather not talk about that. If you,
I think it's really important that we do talk about these things because people need to know more. And the truth is, I have instincts. I have an intuition. I have a gut feeling. And sometimes I don't listen to it because I'm in the shit. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's like really that place of, do I question the situation? Do I tell somebody about it? What do I do? Everything's okay. She said she was going to go for a walk. Everything's fine. The parents said it's okay for her to do that. I don't know. Thank God I did say something that day to the family, like we need to bring this in tighter. I don't think this person should be able to go for walks or drives right now. Unfortunately, that ended up in a overdose and car accident. So, things like that, unfortunately, have happened.
You mean the family didn't listen to you?
Correct.
So how much control do we have over these situations? I mean, that's quite the open-ended question, and every situation is different, I know. So I'm throwing that question out there for thought.
Right.
To think that under your guidance, your recommendation, they didn't follow the recommendation, so they went out, they picked up, and that happened. So what was the takeaway for you? Is there anything you put your finger on?
The takeaway is maybe I should have said something sooner, but shoulda, coulda, woulda. The truth is,
you can't go back and change the past. So no, the value, the woulda, shoulda, couldas, I get, and it's clearly the learning lesson. And one of the things I hope this show is able to do is have people who are listening sitting there nodding their head like a bobblehead doll, going, "Yeah, oh yeah, that happened to me," or "Oh my God, I don't want it to happen to me." So the takeaway here was follow your gut. You got into this because your heart is huge. You got into this because you're motivated. You got into this because you feel an extra drive that a lot of people just can't muster. So since you do indeed possess it, and you of all people, Kathlene, created a business around it, for you to share that you should have followed your gut is a message to me. As I go out there, when I get that feeling, I'm going to listen to your guidance. I'm going to remember your words, and I'm going to hesitate only for that fraction of a second to think, "Yeah, is this right? Yeah, it is." Boom. Folks, have a seat. We got to talk, and take it from there. Patti.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting because, obviously I work a lot with families, and I have been for a very long time. So I've had a lot of, complexities in family systems. And especially if you've got a family that has been, controlling things, for instance, financially, if you've got a family that has a lot of financial resources, or if you've got a system that's really kind of enmeshed in attachment issues or enmeshed in codependency. And what is that? What is behind the codependency? How do you break that without actually, getting into combative kind of conversations with family members to try and roll with those resistance, and yet, let them kind of, almost, go through these processes. So, because there's nothing you can do as a clinician, as a professional sometimes. You can only give them advice. You can only give them direction. And if they're not willing to take those directions, take those, take that suggestion, if you will, then you are kind of letting the family go through their bottom. Unfortunately, in the interim of that, sometimes in cases I've worked on, is that you're sort of going back to almost square one, where if you might have gotten to like level 5 of getting through some of those barriers, but then when something interrupts the system and the family wants to take control again, and then all of a sudden you're back at square one, and then the family is saying, like, I don't know how this happened. And then you have to kind of say, okay, these are some of the steps that were taken, and this is what happened. So then the family member may come back and say, okay, we're not going to do that again. Well, we will follow your direction. But sometimes these things repeat themselves before there's some change in that system. And I'll finish with this. Sometimes you actually have to let family members go through their process in order for them to get to a place of saying, okay, I need professional help. It's not just my identified patient that needs the professional help, that the family members need to know that case management, for instance, is really about the entire family accepting professional help. And I'll leave it with that note.
Absolutely.
It's an incredible note. the family dynamics, we are now starting to realize, first and foremost, you have to embrace it. You can, of course, sweep in. You can help an individual. They can be out on their own. It's not that it's impossible. But if the family is integrated, if they are in communication, well, hold on. I'm listening to myself and I'm realizing, since every situation is different, most of the time when those of us in the field are called, bridges have been burned. The relationships have been pretty much torn asunder. A lot of family just don't want involvement anymore. The role of, now it's funny, who am I talking to? Would it be a therapist, a counselor, an interventionist, or a sober coach, a recovery coach? They're all different. And we all have to stay in our lanes, and those lanes are very different. So I'm actually catching myself as I'm talking to you guys, realizing that what I was about to say truly is more appropriately specific depending on the person's role. But then again, looking back on the family and getting to the point. If we look at the family first and we want to bring the person back into the family, we can take steps to integrate the family by providing empowerment, participation, or their involvement. They don't have to be integral. They don't need to be the person to either address or confront an issue. But they can have a voice, and doing the letters, they can be heard. They don't need to be the ones there, matter of fact. It's entirely possible for somebody in an intervention not physically be there at all. They write the letter, and their voice still be heard. So, Kathlene, have you done interventions directly yourself?
No. There have been situations where I've been working with somebody as, a companion, and there was a relapse that happened, and then I have to confront them along with, the mom or whoever wants to be there and let them know, hey, listen, you've got to go to treatment now. And usually those are younger, either adolescents or early 20s that the family kind of has. So then I've taken them to treatment. But unfortunately, I haven't had any intervention situations come up for me. I always outsource that. So for an example, if something happens, I would call Patti, and or anybody else in that matter. I have so many interventionists that I really love. And something I love that Patti had said at the training was, she really was sharing so much of her professionalism and her experience in the last 20 years in this field. And she was sharing it with all of us. And, she wanted us to take that and then go out there and help others. It's really, there's so many people who need help out there, so why not spread the love and spread the information, the great knowledge that she has. And,
Well, that's a huge deal. And when I said staying in our lane, the term in reference to doing what you do and do what you do well. What you don't do, call on a teammate, somebody else who specializes it. Listen, a clinical therapist is different than an interventionist who is different from a sobriety coach. These roles are, sober transport. Everybody plays their role. And and I hope during the process of this organization, this particular podcast, we can expand our resources and call on other teammates, whether they be in other parts of the country or other parts of town, to do things that we don't do. More power to us. I mean, the truth is we're only individuals, one at a time. We can only deal with one individual at a time. And my phone rings, and I'm with one client. My phone's blowing up. I got to call somebody to help. And, of course, if I find out that it's something outside the scope of what I do, a lot of times people are going to try to rise to that challenge, and that's where they run a risk of running aground. And Patti and I were talking about some of these things before the podcast, when people went out to do a job they weren't trained for. They weren't supervised. They didn't have the skills. They thought that they could do the job, or they've been able to do the job to a modicum of success through one experience or another, and they thought that they could just go out and whatever the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect example. I'm going to tell you guys that I ran into a case when I was actually down in Clearwater during the AIS gathering, which was far over my head. I called on folks while I was down there. What a blessing that I had this wealth of both treatment center representatives as well as other interventionists. And in this particular case, the medical complications exceeded the capacity for any external person to affect change on this individual, at least for the time being, until their medical condition was stabilized. But when it was first put on my plate, Mr. Gung-Ho here, I'm like, oh, sure, I can do that. I can do that. Oh, yeah, I can do that. Hang up the phone. How am I going to do that? And it's like, but, that's never stopped me before, right? We grab our shield and put on our cape and off we go, flying off to doing our Superman or Superwoman thing. And unfortunately, that doesn't work so well.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Patti.
Yeah, so I was just, I guess I'm really inspired by the young adults and folks that, attend my training. I just kind of do a little pitch here for my training, my intervention training.
Oh, wait, before you do that. Wait.
Okay.
We have another break.
Wait.
We have don't
All
tell me.
right.
We have another break here, which is perfect timing because when we come back, Patti will tell us all about the training that you just did, which I'm really very interested in. Okay, folks, we'll be back in just a moment with our guests. And as promised, welcome back. I'm Howie Marlin, and this is Addiction. You got a minute? I'm here with my co-host, Patricia Pike, and our guest today is Kathlene Parker from beautiful downtown Los Angeles, California, where my daughter and my daughter's boyfriend and his fiancée are gallivanting around Southern California, I say with a huge smile. And so greetings out there, all you incredible folks who are out there making a dent. It's interesting. We are faced with this horrific scourge of the tidal wave of the opiate abuse being, through the roof, and addressing the problems of everybody who struggle with alcohol and internet and sexual addictions. And, we're out there doing our best. And the content of this show, as it changes from week to week, is to explore the scope of the talent that is out there to help. So I hope that you all get inspired to take a little action. And we will remind you of how to get in touch with us at the end of the show. And we do hope that you do indeed send Patti or me a text or an email with either a recommendation, a complaint, a suggestion. It's all good. This is relatively new to us. This is our second attempt as a team. And although I've done a couple on my own, the bottom line is I can't do it myself. And I'm not going to try to think that I'm capable of doing anything more than helping one person at a time. And that's the whole idea of this. We are out there doing our best, helping one person at a time. And with any luck, we'll be able to tip the scale. And at least I hope so. At least tip the scale of sanity in our society. And Lord knows we can use a whole bucket of that right about now. Ain't that right, Patricia?
Yes, absolutely, Howie. It's just been a blast getting to know Howie. And
I pay her a lot of money to say that.
What's that?
I pay you a lot of money to say that.
I know. It's all good, Howie. I'm just really inspired by Kathlene being here. And, I guess I get really inspired by some of the folks that I train, that attends my intervention training. And it's really the young adults and the 30-year-olds that I tend to really kind of gravitate to, even though, I have all different ages and all different experiences that attend my training. But anyway, just to kind of follow up on the training that I just facilitated up in Vancouver, I wanted to just kind of just talk about that a little bit.
Exactly
so, yeah,
what? Exactly training for what?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I guess I need to kind of elaborate on that. So I am an intervention trainer. So I train professionals in the community that are looking to expand their skills, folks that want to learn about interventions, learn about family case management, learn about recovery services, and learn about sober companionship. So
Do you follow any specific discipline? Are you a surprise person? Are you a Johnson model? What do you do?
I kind of take a little bit of both. I'm definitely a surprise Johnson model interventionist. I'm also a family systemic interventionist, and I combine both of those models. And I also combine my case management model into my intervention practice. So I kind of I have three styles, really. I have the Johnson model, the family systemic model, and I have the crisis management intervention approach. And I try to really come from this place of of really giving those skills to folks that attend my training. So anyway, that's a little bit about the actual curriculum of the training.
Okay.
But there's a lot more to it.
Go ahead.
I mean, I was just up in Vancouver, and I always kind of speak better when I talk about my true experiences rather than getting into the clinical side of things, even though I definitely have to put on my clinical hat, my intervention hat, my case management hat, my sober coach hat, my treatment hat, all my different hats that I have to wear in this field. But, I had 27 folks that attended my intervention training up in Vancouver, and half of those folks were young adults. They were in their early 20s and 30s. And I still think that millennial kind of approach of folks that came to my intervention training, and they were very inspiring because, they are the folks that we, as people that have worked in this field for a long time, are trying to give them good advice, good structure, good direction, so they can be better professionals as they move forward in their future to help the folks that we are all helping, to get into treatment, to support while they're in treatment or after treatment, or families. And so that's really kind of the reasons why I really have been inspired to do this training. But Vancouver was just amazing. It was really amazing training. I was very inspired by the folks that attended.
How often do you do it?
Well, my next one is in Calgary, Alberta, January 25, 26, 27.
Calgary, Alberta?
Calgary, Alberta in January. Yes.
Are you out of your mind?
Absolutely, I'm out of my mind. Absolutely. That's what I'm all about, Howie.
Is that oil field territory? Are we talking oil fields?
Yes, that's the oil field. It's probably frozen at that time. I don't know. Does oil freeze?
No, it doesn't.
No.
And anybody who works,
okay.
they'll tell you.
Yeah, see, I don't know anything about oil.
But
I know about people,
it gets
but
dark.
I don't know about oil.
It gets dark, cold, and lonely.
Yeah, but you know what? It's a bit of snow. I'm only there for about 3-4 days. So, I get to wear my warm jacket. And, I was born in Newfoundland, Howie. Come on. I was born in St. John's, Newfoundland.
No kidding.
So I kind of grew up, with I was born with a warm jacket.
With long sleeves on.
And also I was born with ice skates. So there you go.
I can so relate.
Are you a good skater?
And actually, I am a good skater. Yeah, it's been a few years, but I have done lots of skating in my time. But also, I have a training up in Malibu, California, in February as well.
Oh, I'll come to
from
that.
Calgary to Malibu, But
wow.
My focus is really doing a lot of intervention trainings in Canada, just because I'm really trying to inspire that, Canada, because there's not a lot of interventionists and not a lot of resources up there.
Really?
And because I am a Canadian, and, it's really important that I do that. But I also do trainings down in the United States from time to time as well.
Maybe I should move to Canada? Eh?
It's interesting. It's an interesting, it's a very wide open field market, if you will, in terms of if you really want to start a business, because there's, in the United States, there's a lot of interventionists, there's a lot of sober coaches, there's a lot of case management services, there's a lot of treatment programs. But when you up in Canada, there's so much space, but there's so many people up there that really need some help. But it's a social system, so folks are not really. They don't understand the whole privatization. So a lot of the treatment programs are funded through government funding. There's some obviously private treatment programs up there that are becoming more and more private. But, it is important to be able to offer those services up there as well. As a matter of fact, I just got a call this week of some folks that want my help with opening up some private detoxes up there, which I'm thrilled.
Oh my God.
I'm really, really thrilled to be part of that. And hopefully that will be a positive outcome for those folks.
Well, it's interesting. I was approached to help with a First Nation challenge up in one of the northern regions. The isolated communities where there's no in, there's no out, except for in the winter for the ice roads. And that limits their interaction socially to the point where there's virtually no way for them to get help. So anyway, I was approached to see if I could participate in that, and I'm waiting to hear back. It's something I would do part-time.
Wow,
Interesting.
is that in Canada?
Yeah.
That is in Canada, Howie?
It is. Yeah, I'll share that with you offline.
Sure, but I just wanted to kind of add to that statement you talked about. Canada, we call them First Nations people, and I had 5 people that attended my training, and 4 were from isolated First Nations communities.
Really?
Up in Ontario, which very close to Toronto, Ontario. And so they were so inspiring to me.
I swear to God, I'm starting to cry. I swear to God.
Yeah, because these people were just soaking up this information about family systems, and because of the culture, that they live and breathe on a day-to-day basis, they really want to be part of this, universal of being part of this other models and techniques in this, because a lot of people may think that First Nation peoples want to just follow their culture and follow their traditional way of healing. And yes, in some cases that is the truth. However, they are definitely searching for other ways to treat their people. And so I had 4 people that came to my training, and I was able to give them a sense of hope and give them a sense of information to take back to their communities. And, one of the questions that they had asked me, how do we practice some of these techniques in our community, because it's such an isolated community? And you know what my answer was? You need to start a family program. And a family program does not just deal with traditional cultural ways, not just, looking at like the sweat lodges and looking at the red road approach, using both of those, but also taking some of the information that, in terms of looking at family systems, but really it needs to start with a family program. And so my hope is that I will continue to work with them to help them connect with other people in the United States or Canada that can actually help them to start to build family programs in their communities, because it's the family programs that's going to start to change some of those attachment traumas that, they have been enduring, for years and years and years and years. So anyway, I mean, I could go on and on about this, but I was very inspired by these 4 individuals that came to my training, and actually their organizations paid for their training, paid for them to actually come. So they were just inspiring.
No
You
kidding.
would have loved it, Kathlene. You would have just loved to see that, because they were just so in depth. It was just amazing to watch.
Well, I want to I just put a big marker here. This, I think, would be a wonderful subject for an entire show. There is a nurse manager, and forgive me, I can't remember your name, from Bournewood Hospital, who has asked me to participate in a program. So we will bring her on the show, and it would be wonderful to talk about this, because there's an interesting thing that happened just a couple of days ago. Somebody was talking to me about one of the casinos in one of our local New England towns, and there was the challenge of the issue of addressing the needs of the community, and there was the haves and the have-nots, and the way that the funds from the casinos are being shared and the way that they're treating and helping each of the different tribes is very different. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of growth, a lot of change here in the United States. And then, of course, up in Canada, the fact that there should be a way, and I may be kicking over a can I don't want to kick over, but there probably is a way to increase the communication so that the resources can be shared. Not necessarily funding, but maybe that can come in one way, shape, or form. But let me just touch on this. When it came to the northernmost tribes, the problem of isolation, people are saying, how do they get drugs? Well, ice roads. And, people don't think about that. That during the winter, when provisions are brought in and the truck lanes are open, these peoples and the products are being brought in. So anyway, my point is, before we go too far afield, the problem is pervasive and it's all over. And just because you're isolated doesn't mean that you don't have a problem. But I'm thrilled that you had folks from First Nation who were down at your training. And that's truly wonderful. What does your training go by? What do you call it?
It's called Can-Am Intervention Training 101. And I also have a case management component in there as well.
So let's talk about the case management issue.
Okay.
My background is clinical. I'm a master level clinician with a LADC here in New England. I practiced in local community services organization for many years, and then with our local hospital on the substance use disorder team. So that's my orientation. The vision of helping somebody is past the emergent critical care, when they get into detox and then to a longer-term treatment, what to do after that. And my vision has been that's where now the real work happens. Hey, you can't think straight until you get the drugs out of your body, so let's go detox. Everybody go to detox. Once they're out of detox, now we can start the work. If I can find a long-term treatment center, if you can afford a high-end one, if I can get you into Teen Challenge, wonderful. But what if I can't? And this is where you came in, Kathlene, living with and providing the spiritual support. What was interesting about you when I was told about you was that you're taking somebody, and this is Kathlene Parker, our guest for today, from Voyage and Serenity. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what you do is you hold their hand spiritually as well as be there physically to basically remind them of medications, doctor's appointments, meetings, helping them pick healthier foods, get exercise, encouraging them to communicate with family members, inviting people from the community into their home, going to events and meetings, and expanding the scope of their lives back to a rational, sane lifestyle. One of the things that I'm so familiar with is when we fall into the tar pit of addiction, our world becomes very tiny. We become very, very omni-focused on when am I going to get my next fix, my next drink, my next hit, and that's about it. So we stop communicating, integrating, socializing. We stop being part of the community, being part of the family, being part of anything. And we really do create, self-isolate ourselves. So what you're doing, and to come full circle in this conversation, is you're showing up at their doorstep saying, now that you have detoxed, let's go. So when you first meet somebody, when you're first oriented, do you meet them in court? Do you meet them at in a shrink's office? Do you meet them outside of community services or a hospital? How do people find that you're there?
Right. Most of the time, I meet somebody when they're still in treatment, and the treatment facility has gotten a hold of an agency, or recently I was contacted. Voyage and Serenity was contacted by an interventionist in Bend, Oregon,
okay,
Matt Brown, and he had let me know about a family that needed a companion for a really sticky situation. So I contacted a sober companion in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, I see.
By the name of Kathlene Rayburn, who's actually my partner in Portland. She runs the Portland office there.
What's her name again?
Kathlene Rayburn.
How do people get in touch with her?
They can call me.
There you go.
Pretty much. I don't have her number right.
That's okay. We'll have you give your contact information.
Absolutely.
About 8 minutes from now, which will be the end of our show.
Perfect. Okay. But yeah, so I contacted her, and she was able to go first. Actually, before that happened, I made sure she was there, she was available, and that she was okay to go into the situation, which was this girl was still using, and she was in her apartment, and she was going to be going to treatment the next day, but she was waiting for her father, and the family was really worried about her living through the night, So
oh, wow.
I was able to call the young lady, and we started conversation. And at first she was very against anybody coming to her home. And I was able, as a case manager overseeing the situation, I was able to connect with her, and she was able to say, okay, yes, I will have somebody come over and stay with me. And that's when Kathlene met her at her home. That's a situation that could happen. The next situation that I've been in is I've met people in the park before they let me come back to their homes. They say, let's have coffee first at the park. And then, like I said, most of the times it's all about connection, really. Do we mesh? Do we, and also like letting them talk most of the time, and me kind of hearing them out, and kind of going along. And I think that's important for trust to be built as well. And so yeah, there's so many different scenarios. That's the truth. But yeah.
Well, I can imagine there's a lot of ways for people to be introduced to help. But your kind of help is really interesting. Your kind of help is very much immersion. Am I right? I mean, you talk about going to Manhattan and living with somebody.
Yes.
Are your typical stays with somebody a week long, a month long, 3 hours long?
Most of the time they are long term. It could be up to 6 months. And so Voyage and Serenity pretty much is, if there is a situation that's like 6 months, we will make sure to have 2 people on the case and not just send one person out for 6 months, because the truth is it's not good for the companion, and it's not good for the person that's new in recovery, for that relationship to grow or for that person to, have a good time in recovery.
Yeah.
So we make sure to, break it up a little bit. If it's 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off with somebody else, switch it up a little bit. And again, like the same case manager oversees the whole thing. So that's a weekly conversation, either FaceTime or in person is preferable. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers some of the questions. It could be 3 hours a day, for months and months, and it could be they're still in treatment and they want to get used to going out and being in, reality a little bit more before they actually leave. So that's actually quite nice as well.
So you could work with the treatment facility, you can work with the family or the individual. Sounds pretty open-ended. So how can people get in touch with you?
So they can contact me via cell phone, and that number is 310-498-5137. Or they can go on to our website, which is voyageandserenity.com. And we have a contact tab there. You can click and email me. And yeah.
Voyage, A-and-D, Serenity, or the ampersand?
Correct.
Voyageandserenity.com. Well, Kathlene Parker certainly has been a real treat, and really appreciate having you on the show today. Do you have any shout-outs for who's your partner? Who's the person you said you work with that you want to say hi to?
Yes, I love her, Tara Lynn Rayburn. She's amazing. She gets my butt in gear, and she runs the Portland office, and she is just on it. She's in Vermont right now. She's on your side of the country, and she's amazing. She has her KDAC. She's getting her master's right now as well. She's
wonderful. She's
worked at treatment centers. She's just a delight, and she has an amazing recovery story herself. So we are teaming up together and really making the Pacific Northwest a little bit more aware of what sober companions and case managers can really do to help.
Wonderful. And I'll certainly be getting online shortly after this thing, so I'll be getting to understand a little more about what's going on. Patti, any parting shots?
I just want to say thank you to Kathlene, and I really appreciate the work that she's doing in the community, obviously. I mean, it's just so needed. And being such an attachment model person in terms of, really trying to come from an attachment perspective in working with clients and families, I can really see that the need of sober companionship, for folks that are in treatment already, to have that support with that transition, back into the community and really starting to help that individual, grow from like getting a foundation, based on some really good values and beliefs that can actually help them as they sort of move towards, this new way of life. So I really appreciate that, Kathlene. And I was sort of thinking about it as you sort of were describing, some of the things that you facilitate with clients. And I was really thinking about the attachment model, because I always do. I always think about the attachment model and how we can, really address some of those folks that are falling between the cracks, that are doing really well, conforming well in treatment. And then when they leave treatment, go back to either using or going back to unhealthy relationships, or just being really hitting a wall, and not knowing what steps to take, and really taking someone by the hand and really hand holding that individual, in a way that you're creating healthy attachments versus unhealthy attachments and codependency. You're really trying to address that in a very kind of gentle kind of way, in a very healthy way. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. The only points that I want to bring out is, it's really important, as we sort of, work in this field, that we have other people that we can collaborate with, and that it's so important to have mentors. It's so important to have supervision. It's so important to become educated and to take part in different types of trainings, and embracing some of those skills and learning from other people. So that I just kind of really want to, just kind of shout out to that. And I think that the other person that I want to shout out to is, I want to shout out to Joe Hunter, because Joe Hunter is a person, and I think we need to get him on our show, Howie. He's a person that has so much integrity, and what he talks about is what he practices, and he was the one that sort of really, has a lot of faith and trust in Kathlene, and my phone is going off. So anyway, with that, I just want to shout out to Joe Hunter.
Well, wonderful. And how can people get in touch with you, Patti?
You can reach me at www.canam, interventions, interventions.com. And also you can reach me at 415-827-3725.
Wonderful. And on behalf of Kathlene and Patti, I'm Howie Marlin. I can be reached at howiemarlin.com, which is also decisionscounselingservices.com, 508-687-0068 here on Martha's Vineyard in New England. So on behalf of Kathlene and Patti, I just want to wish you all the very best. And if you guys stay with me for 1 minute, I'm just going to wrap up the show. And again, it's been a pleasure. So until next time. I've got a saying that describes my efforts. The best I can do is the best I can do. And I will. This brings us to the end of another episode of Addiction. Got a minute? I wish you warm breezes and clear sailing. Till next time, I'm Howie Marlin.